Well, the day after it happened, Cliffside's new Jesus, my old husband, was in the county hospital in stable condition. Preacher Thompson was offering his resignation to the Board of Deacons, but he was not to blame. He'd just been here a couple of months fresh out of preacher's college, and he'd never had to deal with a snake like my car-dealing ex-husband, Larry Rudisell. Of course, the pulpit committee had warned him of the sorry turn our church had taken. Now, the choir director had left the choir and his wife and 8 children to run off to Florida with a singer from Harley's Lounge who was not even Baptist. Now, preacher Crow had gotten so senile, he preached the same sermon 4 Sundays in a row. But they didn't mention that hardly anybody noticed. They just said that he would have to make some major changes. 2 months ago, he preached the sermon that everybody was waiting for, how a church is like a car, and ours was in reverse, and it needed to get back and forth. And with Easter coming up, the time of rebirth, he wanted everybody to go home and think of a way the church could be reborn. The next Sunday, he called on the man who had come up with a truly inspired suggestion to stand up and tell about it. Larry Rudisell, wearing that sport coat he can't button because of his beard butt, gold around his neck to fill every tooth in the county, and with his most sincere look, as in I swear on my dead mama's grave, I didn't know that odometer had been turned back. He unfolded his vision. He claimed that late Friday night he had woke up half blinded by flashing lights and a voice coming from the ceiling telling him to recreate the crucifixion on the front lawn of Cliffside Baptist Church at night with spotlights on the 3 men on the crosses. Sounds to me like one of those UFO articles in the National Examiner. Oh, he said God had told him that he was to play Jesus and his mechanic, Terry Wooten, one of the thieves, a role I figured he'd been playing all along. I looked over at Terry, and from the expression on his face, it was clear that God had not bothered to contact him. And I looked up at the ceiling to see if it was about to collapse and bury us all. And for about 5 seconds, all was quiet. And then everybody started talking at once. It sounded like a tobacco auction. Jimmy Wells, who once bought an Olds 88 from Larry and had the transmission drop out about a half mile down the road. He nominated his brother-in-law, Harry Bain, to play Jesus. Larry pops up and says, Harry's hair is too straight, that Jesus was a Jew and Jews had curly hair. Like Larry's Brillo hair, I presume. And then they got to arguing about Jesus, whether he was really a Jew or not, until after 1 o'clock. And Harry said, let Larry do it. He was too hungry to care. But the preacher suggested that Harry played the thief that got saved, leaving Terry to play the other. A few days later, the preacher called me to ask if I would help build the crosses. Well, you see, I'm a carpenter. Only carpenter, male or female, in the church. My daddy was the best carpenter to ever drive a nail in western North Carolina, and I had learned from him. So I said I would. On Saturday, we met on the church lawn, me and the preacher and Larry Rudisell, wearing those sunglasses like a Hollywood director, telling me where to put the crosses and how his was to be 3 feet taller than the others. And, all right, I'm going right over to the lumberyard. I did, and I got 3 poles to be the main part of the crosses and 3 boards for the arms to stretch out on. Larry said, look to him like telephone poles. He was to play Jesus, not the Wichita line. Oh, I forgot about Jesus being a carpenter. I'm taking this all back to the lumberyard. It's your project now. Well, the Sunday before Easter, Larry's crosses were up. Instead of using poles for the center part, he had used boards made out of cedar, the weakest wood you can buy. So I walked over to that little cross to give it a little push, and I felt it give like a popsicle stick in the sand. Dug up enough dirt to see they had not poured cement in the hole, just packed dirt around it. And I said, anybody who gets up on one of these had better have a whole lot of faith. signed his robe saying he'd rather prove his faith handling rattlesnakes or drinking strychnine. On Good Friday, I went over a little early, and there was Larry's cousin Kevin being made up to play the crucified thief. He had dabs of red paint on his face and hands and feet, wearing a sweatshirt with Elvis on the front, and what looked like a giant diaper, which the preacher said in the Bible is called a loincloth. Terry Wooten was wearing the same, looking like he was about to vomit as he stared up where he'd be hanging in a few minutes. And then I saw the sign, one of those portable ones with about 100 colored light bulbs all around it. Red plastic letters reading, "The crucifixion of Jesus Christ is paid for and presented by Larry Rudisill." Down at the bottom, if Jesus had driven a car, he would have bought it at Larry. Then the new Jesus himself appeared. What looked like was a rotting round halo on his head. Oh, his crown of thorns, with about 30 yards of extension cord covering his shoulder and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. Walked over to that sign and plugged in the cord, and it was flashing on and off. Now he walks over to that middle cross, starts climbing up the stepladder at the base with nothing but a loincloth wrapped around him. He looked like a Japanese sumo wrestler. I watched as the other two got in position on their crosses, and I thought, well, if they ever did bring back crucifixion, the three hanging there would be a good bunch to start. Meantime, the traffic was piling up, the lawn was full of people, a TV crew showed up. At 6:30, the music started. And then the spotlights came on. The crucifixion was supposed to last an hour, but after about 20 minutes, the wind picked up. The crosses started swaying. Kevin was screaming for somebody to come get him down, and folks had run to get the stepladders, but it was too late for Larry. His cross swung forward one last time, you could hear the wood cracking. And with his arms stretched out, he looked like a man doing the swan dive. Shut my eyes, but I heard him hit. When Terry Wooden saw what happened, he stained his loincloth. Well, it's been 3 weeks since all this happened. Now, Larry, in spite of his broke nose and wired shut jaw, is out at the car lot every day. He's become Western North Carolina's main tourist attraction. I'm told that in the past 2 weeks he's sold more cars than in a 2-week period of his life, which is just further proof to me that, as the Bible says, we live in a fallen world. As for me, some people remember that I was the one who said those crosses were not safe. Especially one person, Harry Bain, took me out to eat 2 weeks ago as a way of saying thank you. Tonight we're going dancing at Harley's Lounge. And I'm beginning to think that even in a fallen world, things can be looking up.